Okay, let's talk about the TDS. The TDS, as you probably learned in school back in the day, with your real estate school, it is a required seller disclosure. Let me start here. California is a seller disclosure state. What does that mean? That means there is liability and requirement by the seller to disclose any defects that affect the value or desirability of the property. They are required to disclose that. And right at the beginning, if this is a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, you have to check this box because you have to do a TDS for each unit. You have to put the city in here, the city of, county of, and described address of. We will require all that. And you have to put the date you are completing the TDS. This date matters. Trust me. I've been in arbitrations, lawsuits where issues may happen on the property, but they happen after the TDS was filled out, therefore exempting the seller from disclosure. So that date you put in there is very important when it comes to when we do lawsuits, because it's going to say the seller knew about it at this time and date, or didn't know about it at this time and date. That becomes very important. Do you understand? So we got it, and then you would put this date. All right. This is another thing, and I see this all the time messed up. If there are any inspections on the house completed or received prior, you must check this box. Additional, oh, sorry, the second box here. Additional, if you have reports completed pursuant to the contract, the seller received a deposit. So if you have seller inspections already done and you want them to acknowledge them prior to consummating the contract, you need to check that box. Make sense? If you have inspections that you just want them to know are tied to the TDS, then you would do these. And that is any things. And then you would, if there's no other disclosures, you would check this box, no substantive disclosures for this transfer. Please check this box. Seller is or is not occupying the property. These are things that would be located in the property. I want to make sure everyone understands what these are. Range, oven. Do we understand the difference between a range and an oven? Microwave, dishwasher, trash compactor versus a garbage disposal. Trash compactors are very rare now, but sometimes you still see them in luxury homes. Washer, dryer hookups, rain gutters, burglar alarms, CO detectors, smoke detectors, fire alarm, TV antenna, satellite dish, intercom, central heating, central inner evaporator, coolers. Anyone know what evaporator cooler? There are not too many around anymore, but those are the ones that sit on the attic and they use water to evaporate and cool the house. Those are not very common anymore. Wall windows, sprinklers, public sewer system, septic tank, sump pump. Sump pump is when you have a low-lying area. Typically, you'll see sump pumps in basements where there's a bathroom or drain and the water has to get pumped up to the sewer line upstairs. That is called a sump pump. Water softener, patio decking, built-in barbecue, gazebos, garage attached, which means it's attached to the house, detached to the house, carport, which means it's not enclosed, just a covering, automatic garage door openers, number remotes, sauna, hot tub, locking safety cover, pool, child-resistant barrier. In California, pools are required to have a fencing around them or be from child-resistant, so that is it there? Is there a pool heater, water heater? Who supplies the water, gas, window screens, window security bars, quick release mechanism? Current code for window bars, security bars over windows, there must be a latch mechanism inside the room where the window is that will allow the window bars to be released and open for fire escape reasons. If there are a lot of old window bars that on houses that don't have that, so if they don't, you wouldn't click that. Just know if you're doing an appraisal, it'll probably get caught in appraisal to either remove the bars or replace them. So water conserving plumbing fixtures, if your seller has no idea what that is, do not check that box. Exhaust fans are those fans in your bathroom that suck out the moisture and heat. Similarly, you'll find those in kitchens, over the stove, or in laundry rooms often. So please list that where it is. 220-volt wiring is the big brown black thing that you see in there. That's often used for dryers, washing machines, sometimes appliances in the garage, or sometimes refrigerators. I've seen it too. So just note that where those locations. Fireplace is pretty started. These are gas starter. Roof type. Do we know all our roof types? Comp is the most common. Composition shingle. There is wold comp. There is tile. There is flat roof. So there are a bunch of different roof types. Make sure that is accurate. Age of the roof, that's pretty awesome. And then this is the thing, are the best of your knowledge, any of the above not in operating condition? That means everything here. The number one way sellers get sued is in real estate transactions, which often involve the agent as well, is they do not disclose anything that is not operating up here. So please, when you're talking to buyers about filling these out, they need to make sure they're accurate. Any questions on the first page of the TDS? Second page. Is the seller aware of any significant defects of following? Yes or no? Interior walls, ceilings, floors, exterior walls, insulation, roofs, windows, doors, foundation slabs, driveways, sidewalks, walls and fences, electric system, plumbing, and other structural components. This has to do with the envelope of the house. So, as well as the exterior of the home. So if you have any issues there, please check the box and do that. This will be talking about settling issues, cracks and unevenness in the driveway, leaks in the roof, foundation issues, those sort of things would go here. Then we get to C, which is the seller aware of any of the following: substances, materials, products that may be environmental headers, not limited to asbestos, formaldehyde, radon gas, lead-based paint, mold, fuel, chemical storage tanks, contaminated soil, water, or subject property. Please, okay, let me talk about this. I forgot to talk about this. The standard of knowledge is the seller aware? So if the seller asks you, what should I check on this? You should ask yourself, am I aware of this issue? And if they are not, they should check no. If they are, they should check yes. The seller will know if they have one a substance issue because it is usually involving a government agency at that point tagging the property as well. So features of property shared in common with adjoining land, such as walls, fence, and driveways, whose use or responsibilities affect such a property, you should almost always be checking yes on this, as we are a good neighbor state when it comes to fencing and walls. And so that means both parties on that border are responsible for the cost and care of that wall or fence. So you should be checking that yes. If you're checking it no and there is, your seller could be open to exposure as well. Room additions and structural easements, encroachments, easements, or similar matters affecting the environment. What's an encroachment or easement? Encroachment or easements are use. Well, an easement is use of the property by a neighboring property. So if anyone is using the property, your property, say their property is landlocked and you have to drive through their property to get to, they have to drive through your property to get to land property, that would be an easement. An encroachment is where a neighboring property, they have encroached. That means they have moved the fence line beyond what is the boundary of between yours and taking some of your land or across your, and so that would be an encroachment. So if any of those issues are happening, so I ask, have you ever had a dispute with your neighbor about the fence line and where the fence line is? And if they say, yeah, we argued about it, then you need to be talking about it because that may be an encroachment issue. Make sense? 4A, 4 and 5 are noted. This is good. Also note to C4 and 5. Room additions, structural modification, or other alteration or repairs made without necessary repairs. Well, sorry, necessary permits. So, rooms, additions, structural or other alterations not in compliance with building codes. So please do not advise sellers on whether if they didn't do it with permits, but it looks like it's done to building codes. Let the seller dictate what that is, please. You are not a inspector, knows what building codes are. And as you see this note, if the transfer required the property and within 18 months accepting an offer to sell it, transfer shall make any additional discoveries, room additional structural and other alterations to repairs in the seller property questionnaire. So it's asking for additional information in the SBQ, which we'll talk about next, if they say they have added structural or done structural modifications to the property. Any questions on 4 and 5? We get a lot of dispute on what that looks like. Please note, if the seller knows, even if they didn't do it, but that in addition to the home was added, and when they bought it, it was there, but they know it's not permitted, they need to check the boxes appropriately, and you need to advise them to check the boxes appropriately. I've had lawsuits and mediations when the seller knew they didn't do it, but the seller knew because when they bought it, they were disclosed, and they never disclosed it to the buyer, and there was a lawsuit. So please note please make sure they're aware, even if they're not the ones who did the room addition. All right. Fill, compact or otherwise, on the property, any portions of. Fill is usually because you're having erosion issues or foundation issues. Sometimes they will bring in extra dirt, fill, to replace the eroding dirt to prevent further damage or prop up the property. If you get fill, you will know, usually it's houses on hillsides, houses in rural areas that are having erosion issues that are undermining the foundation. That's where you'll see fill or compact that are happening. You need to ask yourself that. Any settling from any cause, slippage, sliding, or other soil problems. Often fill on 6 is used to address issues of slippage, especially sliding or soil problems. So you need to talk about flooding, drainage, or grading problems. And in the Sacramento area, there are often raised houses that have, because we have a low water table here because of the Sacramento American rivers, a lot of times in the winter, water will pool underneath the house. While not necessarily dangerous, that is a flooding or drainage issue or grading problem. So if there's grading problems where water is at times, even seasonally, getting into the house or getting underneath the house, that would need to be disclosed then. And obviously, if there was a flood at some point, you need to disclose that as well. Major damage to the property from fire, earthquake, flood, or landslide. I think that's pretty obvious. Any zoning violations, non-conforming usage, violation of setback requirements. Setback requirements are setbacks, meaning the county or city or local jurisdiction require the building be set back from front, back, and sides a certain amount of space from the property lines. That's called a setback. So if they're clearly violating a setback, or there's a 0 lot line house, so it's literally sitting on the lot line or things like that, or maybe they put up a shed and the shed is on the setback line, so you may have issues when it comes to setbacks, non-conforming uses, zoning violations. Neighborhood noise problems or other nuisances. If there is a barky dog next door and every time you go outside they bark and bark all the time, and your sellers want to actually try to poison the dog at one point, that's a noisy thing. If the house backs up to a truck stop and there's trucks all the time and they're beep, beep, beep backing up, that would be neighborhood noise. So please, or other nuisances. For example, if you're in Rancho Cordova in Anatolia, out there in Anatolia, there's a tanning hide factory out there that makes leather. And during the summer, man, when they're tanning, it smells. That would be a neighborhood issue. Makes sense? So you need to do that. CC&Rs or other deed restrictions. Please note, if there is a HOA, there are CC&Rs. If there's not, but if there's no HOA, there could still be CC&Rs. Your prelim would let you know. Homeowner association, which is pretty common. Common areas, which is pretty common. Notice of abatement or citations against the property. This would be both, if there is an HOA, this would be notice of citations or abatement against the property, both by the city or county or the HOA. And then any lawsuits against the seller affecting the real property would be there. And anything if you check yes to will need to be disclosed down there. Any questions on C? Just note these questions are required by California law. So not answering these questions could subject the seller to a lawsuit. You would sign that there. And then agents, you are required to sign this there. And it actually asks you on what you're going to do on your agent visual inspection disclosure. And most people check this box and see attached. agent visual inspection disclosure. Now I want to note this. I talked about this back in the day, and I talked this about when I talked about the RPA 2 weeks ago. Even though you have contingencies, inspection, appraisal, and loan. In California, under California law, there is a 5-day right of rescission, separate from the contingencies, that says when the transfer disclosure statement is sent, the buyer has 5 days right of rescission. That means they can cancel the deal. Even if they've waived all contingencies, they can still cancel the deal and get their deposit back based on the TDS. Now, the TDS includes the listing agent's AVID, agent visual inspection disclosure. So if you provide the TDS SPQ, but you're lazy about your AVID, and day 25 of the escrow, you finally get around to doing your AVID and you send the AVID to them on day 25, they have released all contingencies. Basically from day 25 to 30 of that escrow, now the buyer can cancel the deal and get their deposit back because you provided a TDS disclosure after any, at that time, anytime you provide it. So this is not just a one-time thing. It's anytime you provide a disclosure that is attached to the TDS. Let's talk about what disclosure is attached to the TDS. Your AVID, the listing agent's AVID, prelim, NHD, CC&Rs, HOA docs. So some of you who are listing agents and you get HOA docs later in the process after escrow starts, if you finally get the HOA docs day 25 of escrow, guess what? You just gave them a 5-day right of rescission. So I highly recommend when you and this is what my team does. We do our listing agent AVID at the time of listings. Well, I do a 2-step process: sign, and then we go back for photos, and we do the bubble sheet, and we do our AVID then, so that when we do seller disclosures, we don't have these multiple 5-day right of rescissions happening throughout the transaction. And trust me, I've had agents do this. We represented a buyer. They were about to close, literally about to sign and fund. Buyer gets notice that he may be laid off from his job. He wants to cancel the deal. All contingencies released. Seller had already moved out of the house. They moved into their new home because this was about to close. Release contingencies. Agent came to me and said, buyer, I have this buyer, this is the issue. I said, did you get any of the major document disclosures recently? He's like, actually, yeah, yesterday we finally got the HOA docs. That's what we've been waiting on, the HOA docs. They haven't got them. I said, cancel on the 5-day right of rescission. And the listing agent went crazy. I said, talk to your broker. The broker confirmed it. They released the commission. And the seller got in trouble. The seller canceled the deal. And the seller asked the listing agent for money because they were late in producing the HOA docs. They were lazy, and they caused to be vacant. And guess what? They canceled the listing and listed with someone else. So please be careful on that. But agent visual inspection closure should do that. Sellers should sign, buyers should sign, agents should sign. Any questions on the TDS? Required. The only time the TDS is not required is in certain exempt situations with trusts or corporations. But please, that's the very small minority, and we'll be very tight on that. Okay, on to seller property questionnaire. Okay.